Number 10. The Rotten Vale. Probably the single wildest concept for a map they have ever concocted is this festering labyrinth of corpses and bones. The Rotten Vale is the graveyard for life in the New World. Elder dragons across the planets seem to have an instinct to come here at the time of their death. Some of the battle zones of the Vale are just chunks of absolutely colossal dead Dalamadur. The Rotten Vale is a pivotal piece of world building within Monster Hunter World. It is the macabre end for life before it is recycled into the bioenergies that fuel the continents. It fits beautifully with the themes of life, death, and rebirth, and the natural cycles of nature that this game delved into. In the Rotten Vale's case, it is most certainly the embodiment of death. And yet life remains all the same. The denizens of the Rotten Vale are fascinating animals that I find to be expertly crafted to survive in what should be an absolutely unsurvivable part of the continent. In fact, the only issues I have with the Rotten Vale's monster roster is that the animals here are so specialized that it's going to be a bit tough to bring them back into new games. Also, there aren't exactly a ton of monsters built for the Vale specifically, and next to no monsters designed for other maps would fit in particularly well here. So, in Iceborne, the Rotten Vale can find itself a little cluttered up with an abundance of nomadic invader monsters that the game just throws at every map. What was crafted for the Rotten Vale is exceptional though. The Gyros are opportunistic little sneaks that will paralyze and eviscerate anything and everything that shows even a remote sign of weakness. Radoban is a Goliath of a brute wyvern that uses tar and the unlimited supply of monster bones in the area to create a suit of spiny battle armor for himself. The Odogaron is a violent savage that embodies the Rotten Vale's hostilities and will attempt to kill just about anything that moves. The acidic Glavenus weaponizes the acids created by the Rotten Vale to coat its tail in an armor-corroding crystal formation. And Valhazak, the Lord of the Rotten Vale, helps to maintain and control the Vale's population of biodegrading bacteria called effluvium. The denizens of the Vale are incredibly well designed for the grotesque nature of their homeland. Artistically, there certainly are more diverse maps out there. The Rotten Vale is almost exclusively a giant pile of corpses, but the Rotten Vale manages to execute its core concept very well and get some decent mileage out of it. The entire map is absolutely drenched in bones and carrion. The upper levels being exposed to sunlight and the lower levels being predominantly covered in cave ceilings does create some distinct contrast between these two sections though. The darkness of the Vale's depths creates a more oppressive tone, which makes the upper regions seem far less grim simply by comparison. However, there is some beauty way down deep in the very bottom of the Vale. A separate set of caverns which opens up into chambers illuminated by pools of glowing blue acidic liquid. It is an odd slice of deadly gorgeousness that can be found glimmering at the bottom of this graveyard. And if one treks all the way into the deepest regions of these caves, they will find a chamber lit up in a hellish red, which illuminates a mountain of corpses, where Valhazak rules the Vale from. I think what the Rotten Vale ultimately excels at the best in is its lighting. There are a lot of regions that are a tad samey, for sure, but the darker and darker the map gets as it descends, only for the light of the sun to then eventually be replaced by this bizarre alien glow, grants the place a satisfying sense of progression and intrigue. The gameplay here is also pretty solid. The upper regions have some ledge-dotted zones, droppable Dalamadur fangs, and a few areas with netting that monsters can get snared in or use to cause AoE quakes. The lower regions of the Vale focus more heavily on their damage over time effects. The health-draining effluvia covers pretty much the entirety of the bottom of the Vale, minus the acid caves. Thankfully, there are tons of flame pods scattered around the place to disperse the effluvia, and the radius and duration of this dispersal is pretty solid. Fighting in these zones really isn't all that much of a hazard. It just takes a very quick interaction to get rid of the issue. I'm personally a fan of map interactions like this since you really don't have to jump through too many obnoxious hoops to deal with this kind of problem. The acid pools at the bottom of the Vale have much harsher damage over time, which actually makes for a really fun risk-reward area in Zone 12, where there's some jumping attack ledges that sit right over an acid pool. Those jumping attacks are very easy to land, but you're likely going right in the acid afterwards. There's some more droppable Dalamadur fangs down here, and Valhazak's entire Corpse Mountain is pretty much just one giant sliding zone to fight on, but it also provides the coolness factor of fighting a big boss dragon atop a huge cinematic elevated corpse pile. I am also a fan of the mixture of jumps and slides and valley-like structure of Area 5. It's super fun to fight monsters in the jaws of a Dalamadur skull in Area 4. I enjoy the mixture of monster trapping vines and one continuous ledge in Area 2. It can be a ton of fun to fight Odogaron in Zone 10, where there's a pit you have to maneuver around. He's got a ton of walls he can jump off of, and you also have these paratoads and aggro-breaking shrubs that you can use to your advantage. The Corpse Slide in Zone 9 is pretty fun to fight on. Other zones like 1, 7, and 8 are all perfectly serviceable as well. I think Odogaron's nest is kinda obnoxiously small, but he never lives long enough to use it anyway, so that's not really a problem. The biggest issue with the battle zones is that the entire top area of the map is criminally underused. Before Iceborne came out, you only really could fight Radoban up there. Tigrex can get up there as well once he was introduced in Iceborne, but he also spends like half of his time downstairs. The monsters who use the upper region of the Vale the most are invaders like Deviljho, Basilgeuse, Bonboro, and Velkhana. So if you really want to fight in the upper levels of the Vale, you can, but some of these guys are really weird to fight in the Vale, and honestly, this top layer is just criminally underserved by the monsters who are actually designed to be here. I also absolutely would have liked more direct pathways from the top of the Vale to the bottom. There's a few more secretive vines and tunnels and a couple of ledges that can be jumped off of, but only one conventional route down. What's there is fine. The slope is very close to base camp, and you'll likely be following most monsters up and down it anyways, but for reasons like expeditions with no set target and giving the monsters some varied pathing to use, another ramp or set of climbable vines would have been very nice here. And the music absolutely deserves a mention as well. This track is crazy good. It's not nearly as grim or despair-filled as a Valley of the Dead would imply, though. It honestly seems to lean way more into the mystery and intrigue that such a place would conjure in the imagination. The whole track is driven by these insanely heavy drums, which I'd say shows how deep down beneath the rest of the world this place is. There's a bizarre and alien yet kind of welcoming use of what I'm pretty sure is a synthesizer to start the track off before the brass comes blaring in with the percussion under it. A flute soloist then leads into an enormous swell of horns and strings, which creates an incredibly beautiful sense of adventure, whilst not abandoning the darker feeling of the Vale. And that is the Rotten Vale. To this day, the most out there map concept that Monster Hunter has ever pulled off. I'm interested to see if Wilds will make an attempt to top it. It's a map that suffers from success a little. It's so specialized that its dedicated monster roster is rather small. Chunks of it go lightly used, outsider monsters don't really seem to fit here, and those that can enter the Vale almost only go there because they can go to every map in the game. It has a great grab bag of gimmicks and combat zones, a fascinating part of the New World's life cycle, a brilliant score, and some excellent progression of lighting and atmosphere as you delve further and further down. I don't think this one will ever be forgotten.